Hi, everyone. I hope you're all safe and healthy, and I hope your families are safe and healthy. This is the worksheet for session 6. It is posted on Blackboard. You obviously don't have to print it out, but it might be nice to refer to it because it has important information and it has definitions of vocabulary terms. So, the objective for today's session is to demonstrate an understanding of when and how to use rates and densities to analyze real-world problems. The first thing I want to do is talk about what a rate is. So what is a rate? To understand what a rate is, it might be a good idea to backtrack to what a ratio is. So remember that a ratio compares two quantities. And the thing about a ratio is that these two quantities are measured in the same way. They're expressed using the same units. For example, if I have this situation, which was a scenario from quiz 1 that you recently completed, in this situation, I'm saying that there's 5 grams of fat in a 14-gram serving of butter. So if I want to write that as a ratio, that would be 5 grams over 14 grams. But since the units are the same, I don't necessarily have to write the units, so I can express it as 5 over 14. What's different about a rate is that it's a ratio comparing two quantities that have different units of measurement. So the two numbers are not being measured in the same way. For example, this is a scenario. A bicyclist rode 49 blocks in 14 minutes. Notice that these two numbers are being measured in a different way. This number is being measured using blocks. This number represents minutes. So I can write that as 49 blocks over 14 minutes. This would be a rate. So we have a special type of rate called a unit rate. Sometimes we also call it an average rate. And basically, a unit rate or an average rate compares a quantity to one. Because when we're comparing a quantity to one, it's easier to understand what this rate is telling us. For example, let's say we take this same rate and converted it to a unit rate. So remember, my rate was 49 blocks over 14 minutes. If I want to compare it to 1, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the denominator so that it's now a 1. And I can do that just by dividing the two numbers. I can divide 49 by 14. If you use your calculator to divide 49 by 14, that's 3.5. 3.5 is the same as 3.5 over 1. You can also think of it as dividing both the numerator and the denominator by 14. If you divide this by 14, you get 3.5. If you divide this by 14, you get 1. So these two are equivalent. 49 over 14 is the same as 3.5 over 1. But what I did is I converted this rate to a unit rate because now it's going to be a little easier to understand how fast this bicyclist is able to travel. So now this rate says 3.5 blocks over 1 minute. That is basically telling me that the bicyclist is able to travel 3.5 blocks per minute. So every single minute that this bicyclist is riding, he or she is able to cover a span of 3.5 blocks. So let's try some practice problems relating to this, and you'll also have practice problems in the assignment that's due today. Let's say I want to express two different unit rates for the following scenario. So I'm told milk costs $6 for 2 ounces. So if I want to purchase 2 ounces, a 2-ounce carton of milk, that's going to cost $6. So what I can do is Remember, I want to express it as a unit rate. This is my regular rate so far. $6 over 2 ounces. So if I want to express it as a unit rate, I'm just going to divide. 6 divided by 2 is 3, right? And 3 is the same as 3 over 1. You want to make sure you keep the units consistent. So at the top, I had dollars. At the bottom, I had ounces. So my unit rate is $3 per ounce. Now, depending on the scenario, sometimes you can divide in either direction. So I divided 6 by 2. To determine the unit rate, I can also divide 2 by 6, and that will tell me a different type of rate in the scenario. So if I divide 2 ounces by $6, using your calculator, if you divide 2 by 6, that's approximately 0.33. 0.33 is the same as 0.33 over 1. Again, you want to make sure you keep the units consistent. At the bottom, I had dollars. At the top, I had ounces. So this is telling me 0.33 ounce per dollar. So I basically was able to determine 2 different pieces of information. Based on this cost, I would be paying $3 for every single ounce that I purchase. Or I can also think of it this way. I would be getting 0.33 ounces of milk for every single dollar that I spent. So let's try a different problem now. Mike typed a 1,000-word article in 40 minutes. At this rate, determine how many words he can type in 55 minutes. So let's calculate a unit rate. The reason why it would be important to calculate a unit rate here is because if I want to determine how much he can type in 55 minutes, it'll be useful to determine how much he can type in 1 minute. And in order to determine how much he can type in 1 minute, I have to convert this into a unit rate, because remember, that's how we define a unit rate. A unit rate compares a quantity to 1. And right now, I'm not comparing this quantity to 1. I'm comparing it to 40. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to write my rate. My rate is 1,000 words over 40 minutes. I'm just going to make this bigger. Okay, so remember, to convert to a unit rate, you're going to divide the 2 numbers. So I'm going to divide 1,000 by 40. That's 25. 25 is the same as 25 over 1. So I'm going to write 25 over 1, and I'm going to be careful and make sure I keep the units the same across the numerator and denominator. So remember, the numerator was expressed using words, and the denominator was expressed using minutes. So Mike is able to type 25 words in 1 minute. In other words, I can say 25 words per minute. So now I'm not done, because he need to use this unit rate to determine how much he can complete in 55 minutes. And the next step is just to multiply. If he can complete 25 words every single minute, To determine how much he can write in 55 minutes, you would just multiply. So 25 words per minute times 55 minutes. Using your calculator, 25 times 55, 1,375. So 1,375 words in 55 minutes. All right, let's do another example. This example says a cell phone can receive 120 messages per minute. At this rate, how many messages can the phone receive in 150 seconds? So again, I'm going to have to express this as a unit rate. What's easier is this is technically already a unit rate because 120 messages per minute is essentially 120 messages per 1 minute. So I'm just going to write that down. My rate, 120 messages per 1 minute. But what's tricky about this problem is that I want to know how many messages the phone can receive in 150 seconds. So this value is being expressed in seconds, not minutes. So there's two different ways you can calculate this. One way is you can express your rate using seconds instead of minutes. So remember there's 60 seconds in 1 minute. So I can say that this phone is able to receive 120 messages in 60 seconds. And then I can divide. If you divide 120 by 60, that's 2. 2 is the same as 2 over 1. I'm going to keep the units the same across the numerator and denominator. So this means the phone is able to receive 2 messages in 1 second. So what I basically did is I took my unit rate and I expressed it in terms of seconds instead of minutes. So this phone can receive 2 messages per second. So now the next step would be the same as a previous problem. If the phone can receive 2 messages every single second, and I want to determine how many messages it can receive in 150 seconds, I would just multiply 2 messages per second times 150 seconds equals 300 messages. So that would be the answer. I'm going to show you another way to calculate this. Another way you could have calculated this is by starting with 150 and converting that in terms of minutes. So remember we said that 60 seconds equals 1 minute. So we want to determine how much is 150 seconds. The way you would do that is you would just divide 150 by 60. If you divide 150 by 60, that's 2.5 minutes, 2.5 minutes. You can also think of it this way. If 60 seconds is 1 minute, that means 120 seconds is 2 minutes. If you add on half a minute, which is 30 seconds, you would get 150 seconds, leading to 2.5 minutes. So now that we know that 150 seconds equals 2.5 minutes, you can multiply this to the original rate. The original rate was 120 messages per minute. If you multiply 120 messages per minute times 2.5 minutes, 120 times 2.5 is 300. You get the same answer, 300 messages.